Hi, friends, and welcome to another episode of Supportive Service Dogs. Today, I thought I would answer my most frequently asked question: how do I register my dog as a service dog? What do I need to do, or what website do I need to go to register my animal as a service animal? And I'm going to tell you. Plot twist, there actually is nowhere that you can go to register your dog as a service animal in the United States that has any legal bearing. So there's websites. If you go look right now, you can just look up service dog registries or service dog registration, and you're going to be bombarded by websites. Basically, you can register, and if you go, a lot of service dog handlers within the community have played the system just to see what they can get away with. And people have certified things such as a jar of Nutella. Registering your dog with these registries means literally nothing. They don't do checks to check if the dog is trained to behave in public. They do literally nothing other than take a card payment and send a certificate, and usually peddle things like vests and leashes that say service dog and things like that. Literally printing money for them. When I've talked about this before in the past, I guess people are like, well, I use that for my apartments. Legally, your apartments can ask for a note from your doctors anyway. Some apartments, if your apartment is currently taking something that you've received on the internet like this, know that if you go to switch apartments, you might not be so lucky. Service dog registries in the United States do not exist. I'm going to repeat that again. And that's basically what this whole podcast is about today. Service dog registries do not exist. I'm going to tell you guys a personal story, something that's happening to me right now. I've been talking extensively about my issues at my pain management facility. And one of the issues I had was I no longer usually take my service dog to a first appointment. I will broach it there. This is not something that I'm required to do, but it's something that I've started doing ever since I've run into issues, especially at medical offices, with access issues with my service animal. And so basically what I'll do is I'll usually go without a service animal, ask the questions that need to, and usually I can get a good feel about the facility from that. And that's just something I've done to protect myself, protect my peace. It's not something I'm required to do. And it's something that honestly has cropped up because of anxiety, because of issues. They had a big sign on the door that essentially said certified service dogs only. And when I inquired within, they were essentially yeah, we require paperwork. And so I was okay, guess what? I don't have paperwork. I have a task trained service dog in the United States, and I don't have paperwork because it does not exist. And I tried to explain this to them. They're like, I don't know. That's an issue for up top. And so I was like, well, how do I get a hold of up top? And nobody could tell me. And within this facility, it was everything was a different department. And so, yeah, they probably had really no idea who was responsible for this. So fine. And then I got something on my phone that cropped up that was hey, how was your service, or how was your experience at our facility? And I was actually, just so you guys are aware, the sign on the door is legal, and I think you guys need to take a look, or send this to legal to take a look at this particular piece of the ADA. And I didn't hear anything back. I actually tried to call and talk to them about this. I didn't get anything back. And more recently, I had to have a manager call me because we're having so many issues with billing. And I essentially said I was done utilizing the facility because of it's taken them 4 months to produce me an answer of how much I owe for a procedure in October, when most places typically have that in advance. And they kind of told me false answers, false things. I don't know. It's a whole story. It's a whole saga. I keep addressing it, but we're going to skip over that for now. But I had to speak to their manager, and she's like, is there anything else? And I was like, yes, I keep trying to get a hold of somebody about my service animal and about amending the rules to this particular facility and dealing with the sign that's on the door. And what she tells me, she was very rude to me, honestly, the entire time. But what she tells me is that that's from legal down, and that's what they're required to put out. And she proceeded to tell me that there's several people who have certifications who've had no problem handing it over. And it was kind of like a backhanded thing, I think, to me, like calling my bluff. And so I was like, well, it's still illegal. I'd still like to speak to somebody maybe up in legal then, if that's where it's coming top down from. I was like, I can wait for the phone number. You can give me an email and I can get a hold of them. And she was being really weird. She's like, actually, I don't know. I don't know where it's at. I'd have to look, and like didn't want to give it to me. And so I was like, okay. My spouse ended up going on their website and found everybody's phone number, email, everything. Like they have everything on there. I don't know if they should or shouldn't, but whoever would be essentially in charge of like the legal practices. And he called and left a voicemail and was like, hey, this is like what we've been told. My wife's a patient and visits you guys, and this is what we've been told by this office, and this is what we're greeted with. We're having issues with the facility. We're not interested in returning, but before we leave, we would like to like not leave this stone unturned. And they did. They called us back. And so what's kind of wild, somebody is probably in trouble. They're like, no, that is not our policy. That did not come from us down. We have no idea. We're going to contact them directly to amend that sign and put some training forth. And so, like, yes, I went through like a really honestly sucky situation at this particular medical place, but it makes me happy to know that, like, I'm leaving, I'm exiting, I'm making it better for the next disabled person who comes through the door, the next patient who comes through the door. And that's kind of how I feel about disability rights and working towards that in general and talking about things like service dog issues. Essentially, I want to spotlight and work through issues in my own community and talk about other ones that are happening maybe more on a national scale and make things better for disabled people, even if that's just a small thing at a time, even if that's just changing one person's mind online or educating people online. Because I know a lot of people like to say that like online activism isn't real activism, but I think a lot of people have probably learned a lot about things like service animals or people with disabilities through social media. And so, in a way, social media is our activism and it is our way to get in front of other people and say like, hey, this this is how we see it from our point of view. This is an issue that we keep seeing happening, or this is like a misunderstanding that people have that is affecting us within our disabled community. And for a change, the internet and different platforms allow us to be able to talk to people directly and educate people directly, where this isn't happening on things like radio, TV, movies, and popular regular media. It's happening in more grassroots type fashion with people online speaking on YouTube, TikTok about their disabilities, about their disabled experiences, sharing their reviews of different establishments so other people who are disabled don't have to visit that place or can find different ways to manage, or people make videos for other disabled people to show them how different processes work and ease anxiety or make things easier to get through, because sometimes being disabled is just exhausting. And it's nice to know that there's a community and that we're all working towards in our small ways for the collective better. And the more that we talk about these things, including things like service dog registrations, the less that people are going to come to expect those. They're going to know because either A, they've been educated by somebody in the community, i.e., us going around them, calling legal to be like, hey, and I bet you this lady too, like, thought I was bluffing. I was not bluffing. I was not kidding. Like, I was going to take it up to the top so that this could be addressed. And I encourage everybody to do that when you see something that's not right. It shouldn't be our job. Like I said, being disabled is exhausting. There's a lot that comes with it. There's a lot that we're balancing it. So it's not like we should be forced or should be required to have to do all of this advocacy for ourselves and for our community. But it's really come down to that because people genuinely have a misunderstanding of so many aspects of disabled life and things like the ADA. Like people really don't understand, or some people use people's misunderstandings to gain things or game the system in a way and bring their dog into Walmart, and they get false information like, oh, nobody can ask any questions about the service dog because of, they won't even say the ADA, they'll say HIPAA, which that's always wild to me. Do you guys see that all the time? People are like, because of HIPAA laws, they cannot ask you about your disability, your service dog, nothing. It's like they can't really ask you directly, like, what is wrong with you? What disability do you have? But they can ask what your service dog's tasks are trained to perform. Like what do they do? They can't ask them to perform them like a circus animal, but they can ask what they do. And so in a roundabout way, you do have to reveal bits about yourself if you are asked this. And are they a service animal? You are allowed to ask those questions. And this also brings me, I have so many wild stories just because, again, I think a lot of people who are service dog handlers have wild stories like this. And this was maybe my bad. Maybe I was doing too much, but genuinely it was not made for those ears. But again, I think this is where people just, they think it's okay. They think they're not going to be asked about it. They think they're going to get away with things like these people didn't even have a certification. Okay, but I have to tell a story. This feels like a story I have to tell right now. So we were at an Aldi and somebody had a Yorkie in a stroller who was very, very upset and was barking, 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 and was like at the mesh at my service animal. And we passed by them and I whispered to my husband, and I don't know if they were just like hyper aware of me as well, but like whispered to my husband, I was like, I didn't know service dogs knew to do that. And it was kind of like a tongue-in-cheek joke to him, like I didn't know service dogs were allowed to do that. But they heard me and they were so upset. They're like, who said that this is a service dog? And it's like, you did. If you brought it in, if you are bringing a dog into a non dog friendly establishment, you are saying to the public and to that store that that is a service animal. So you did. And they kept like accosting me through the store. And like, again, yes, maybe I should have saved it for the car. But I genuinely didn't say it very loud. I didn't think that they would hear me. And they were so upset. And then the dog wouldn't, the dog was so naughty too. I want you to understand they were so upset about this. And the whole entire time, the dog is so upset that my dog is in the store that the dog is still barking all the way on the other side of the store. And they come up to me, they're like, well, it's just a baby. It's just this, it's just that. And it's like, I don't care. Service dogs, when you're bringing them into public, they need to be trained to handle the public, and that includes other dogs. They need to be trained for a whole variety of situations. And sometimes things come up, and sometimes we're learning, and sometimes things throw them off. But generally speaking, they need to have it together. And if another dog, even being in the same store as them, aisles and aisles away, is a problem, then that dog is an issue and needs to be removed. And I'll go like on record here and I will say that like I hate fake spotting and I see dogs all the time that like for sure give me some red flags that they are not like a service animal. But to be totally real, if a dog is in a facility and they are minding their business and they leave my service dog alone and allow them to perform their duties, I care much less. I'm not saying that it's okay or that they should have the right to do that. But if they are walking, not riding in the cart, not bothering other dogs, it's less of an issue. It's at the very least not causing a safety issue or a distraction issue to my service dog. Does that make sense? But at the same time, again, when you are looking at these certifications and every single time you go out of your way to collect a certification, to check it, you provide a certification, you pay for a certification, you legitimize this system. And the same thing with like talking about it, general rhetoric about it. If you're talking with your friends about it, like, oh, I wish I could certify Pookie as my service dog. I don't know, just think before you speak, think before you act, think before you take your dog places. And I always want to say too, I want you to think about it from your dog's perspective. They stay home all the time. They're not people's dogs that aren't service dogs aren't accustomed to the noises, the sounds, the quantity of people, the attention. It can be a dangerous situation for them or uncomfortable for them just because you think it's super fun that you're taking your dog to Walmart doesn't necessarily mean that they are having the most fun either. They just don't have a choice in the matter. I want you to also think about your dog's feelings too, because I see that all the time. And I want to make an entire video, and this is kind of a side rant. I watched the H3 podcast for years, and I want to do an entire video where I kind of dig in to his specific rhetoric and how he talks about disabled people and how he's done things within the disabled community. But there was one thing, and I think it might have been on his member show. I'm no longer a member, and so if there's things that are continually said, I have no idea. But it was like a member stream where they were talking about their live show, and people were like, "Well, can we bring our dogs?" And he's like, "Sure, like heck yes." And again, it's probably up to the theater if pets are allowed. First of all, I don't think that like he was able to make that decision. And he said he essentially, and worst thing, they can't ask you if it's a service animal or not. That's against, I don't remember what he said. You can't ask. They can't do this. They can't that. Just take them. And the whole time, all I can imagine is if you've like seen their shows or familiar with their content, I want you to imagine a dog that A is like not accustomed to these kinds of environments at all being put into them. That's so uncomfortable and so disgusting and so weird. It's like my service dog's been through fireworks and Disney and has done a lot of like really hard places and hard areas. And even I would take pause before taking my service dog to a show where Nair has been thrown into the audience and pieces of food and things like that. And then asking like, hey, can we all bring our dogs? Like, yeah, get yippee, what a recipe for success. And what if somebody did bring their service animal? Like, then there's just a bunch of dogs around. No. And there's just certain things like as a service dog handler, I don't do the other people's dogs do. I don't bring them to the dog park, things like that. I don't trust how other people have trained and handled their dogs. Even if I see another dog that looks good, is well behaved, I will make a point to walk around them or go on the other side or something like that and give them their space. I have had this happen a few times at Disney, and I see them, I point them out to my spouse, and I just kind of say like another one, and we move and reposition ourselves because you have no idea. Be cautious with service dogs. Quit asking for licensure, certifications, everything. Quit advocating that people bring their dogs weird places. Like if you get on Instagram right now too and you just look up like dogs of Target, it's like an entire thing, or even like big like dog influencers will take their dogs to Target as like a special thing, and it's like a special thing within the community, which is wild to me. And every time I go into Target, it's always a circus. There's always another dog, or I find that the people at Target are more primed to approach us. One time I had Barbie, my service animal, sitting on my lap. She's mid-sized, smaller, so she often rides on the lap of my wheelchair. And some lady was so excited and had no filter and just approached me and was holding her arms out like this for the dog. And I was not going to give her my dog. Like, I'm telling you, I need to make like an updated thing of like experiences I've had as a service dog handler. I have one video up now that's older, but once you have a service dog, you are going to run into the wildest people. People are going to give you the wildest stories about this, that, about why they can't accommodate you. People are going to come up with ways to try to disqualify you. There's just so many things. Like, and I want to do this about the community too, because there's a lot of community rules too that also just aren't real. Like I think a lot of people have taken four on the floor and taken that the wrong way. That's a saying within the community to denote that the dog should keep their feet on the floor and not be what it should be representing is that they shouldn't be pushed in things like shopping carts, things like that. But legally, and a lot of people do, you can hold your service animal. Mine rides on my lap. You can put them in a sling if they're small enough. There's a lot of things smaller service dogs can perform. And if you see a dog that's like, I see this all the time. I'm in a lot of different subreddits, specifically the Walt Disney World subreddit. People will be like, I saw a Yorkie today in the parks. There's no way that's a service animal. And it's like, well, that's another thing. They can be any breed. It's like you can tell that they aren't certified. That's like another thing you'll see too. That's like the general rhetoric. You know they're not a certified service animal. None of them should be. And if that one is, then they wasted their money. And I don't know what to say. I'm going to continue to educate so people don't waste their money. And instead of wasting your money on the certification, spend the money on training, or if you can, spend your time on training. That's free. You can give your time and your energy to your dog, and I think that's the thing that a lot of people don't do. But this has been a big, long rant of a podcast, but I just kind of wanted to touch on the service dogs are required to have certifications and why people who continue to buy them, talk about them, ask them, are continually feeding a system that makes it harder and harder and harder on people with service animals. And so if you are like a service dog handler and you're thinking about getting one, just like make it easier on yourself. Don't feed into the system. Let's educate and stop this. Like, this is something that I think needs to happen. I'm going to wrap this podcast up. My name is Charlie. I am the main person behind It's Barbie Paris. I'm going to go film my new podcast, Sparkles and Sunsets, a Twilight fan podcast, where we go chapter by chapter talking about the Twilight series. So I know that's completely different, but if that's something you're interested in, it will be on the same site that you're on now. If you can find that one, you can find this one, or if you can find this one, you can find that one. So I appreciate you guys so much for watching, and I will talk to you guys soon.